protesters descending on Columbia University, arresting dozens of pro-Palestinian.
Take a look at what happened.
About a deadly school shooting in Winder, Georgia.
Indicated the committee, run by the State Department of Health, determined the death of 28-year-old Amber Thurman was likely preventable if she'd had access to abortion care in her home state of Georgia.
Just over the mountains, much of Asheville, North Carolina, is underwater this afternoon.
I-40 shut down in both directions between Tennessee and North Carolina.
The French Broad River is reaching record levels near the Biltmore Estate.
The Buncombe County Sheriff says its office received more than 1,000 missing persons reports. Thousands of people are still without power and water.
FEMA workers had to stop work after National Guard troops reported seeing armed militia threatening them nearby.
If our current political climate has you feeling absolutely stressed right now, please know that you are not alone. In fact, recent results from the American Psychiatric Association's annual mental health poll revealed that of those who were experiencing anxiety, 73% cite the election, and 70% say that current events are the primary source of their anxiety. Have you ever been having a good day, out with friends, spending time with family, just to open up your phone and another horrible event has taken place? Another shooting, another bombing, another horrible statement made, more death, more rights taken away. And the next thing you know, your heart starts beating a little bit faster. You start feeling concerned, anxious, scared, and you start looking for more information. From Twitter to Instagram to TikTok to Google to reaching out to friends, in a matter of minutes, you've gone from being in the moment and calm to experiencing real fear. While in the moment you are safe, your nervous system doesn't know that. News outlets feed into this fear, with headlines that make it seem like they have information that is imperative for you to know right now. It's made to elicit a strong emotional response from you, because it's good for clicks and views. But consuming too much political content can lead us to feeling like the world is an inherently dangerous place. People are inherently selfish and evil, and can make us feel very suspicious and negative to others throughout our daily life. I want to take a moment to validate that it is a normal human experience to be afraid when your human rights are at stake. From accessing healthcare and reproductive freedom, existing safely in a society as a trans person or LGBTQ identifying individual, the increasing gun violence, book bannings, the dissolving of DEI, the ongoing humanitarian crisis in Gaza, and more. It would be incredibly out of touch and privileged of me to infer that you can simply turn off your phone or TV and feel safe. So many individuals experience real violence every single day just existing. I also do think it is incredibly important to stay informed. As a Gen Z, my generation is known for voter and political apathy because so often we feel helpless about the current state of the world. And while that is a normal reaction to an abnormal situation, I encourage you all to stay informed and become active for causes in ways that are meaningful to you. So I know what you're probably thinking. So being too informed is bad, but apathy is bad. So what am I supposed to do? How am I supposed to stay informed while prioritizing my mental health? Well, I am so glad you asked, because this is why I sat down with two experts on this topic. I spoke with two amazing content creators and activists to learn more about their work and how it impacts their mental health and how within that they stay mentally healthy. First, I spoke with Alejandra Gomez, known on Instagram, TikTok, and Twitter, or X, as Little Native Girl. Alejandra is an Indigenous human rights activist known for their work on foster youth, racial equality, and other social justice issues. Alejandra uses their social media platforms to educate, raise awareness, and empower. I also sat down with Noa Gasway, a master's in counseling student at California Lutheran University, who received her BA in Psych at UC Berkeley in 2023. She is a member of NAMI Next Gen's Community of Practice, a former 988 Crisis Line volunteer. She has worked in adolescent behavioral health at Evolve and is a current caregiver at Cambridge Home Care. Noa is passionate about mental health and social justice advocacy work.
Thank you so much for meeting with me. First, I would love if you would share a little bit about the work that you do.
Yeah, of course. Thank you so much, Rebecca. I wanted to share just a little bit about me. So I am First Nations, Ojibwa, Cree, and Chicana, and my work is centered around human rights, especially for children's rights. I focus on the Child Welfare Act, ICWA, and youth homelessness prevention. So that's more on like the policy realm. And then I use social media as a form of advocacy to talk about issues from across the globe that are affecting our communities. So that could be like Palestine, Congo, Sudan, and even current events that are happening on Turtle Island.
Rebecca, thank you so much for having me. I'm so glad to be here today. I have always been very deeply involved in social justice issues. I grew up in a very diverse family, so I've always been passionate about equal rights, equality for everyone. I really got into activism and advocacy when I turned 18. In 2020, there's a lot going on in the world with COVID and Black Lives Matter and the presidential election. It was just, there was a lot happening at the time, and I was getting very interested in everything going on. And so that's when I started working with an organization called Postcards to Voters, where I wrote postcards to voters in swing states, encouraging them to vote in the local election or the presidential election. And that started with the Trump and Biden presidency. And then I was also involved in the Senate runoff in Georgia. And so, yeah, that's a little bit about how I'm involved in politics, but I'm also a huge mental health advocate. And I think they really go hand in hand. And it's really important to consider both when you're in either of those fields.
Yeah, I think that's a really good question, how the current political events and like the current political climate has impacted my mental health. As someone that is an advocate and is really wanting to understand what's going on around the world, I've had to find myself creating boundaries and not ruminating on certain issues, but also trying to stay informed and making sure that I am educated, as well as prioritizing my mental health and taking care of myself. I found that when issues were happening, I would get so deep into it, and it would almost make it to where I was constantly thinking about it, constantly scrolling on it. And I had to remind myself, like, what are some boundaries that I can create to make sure that I am still being informed and still sharing with my community, as well as taking care of myself and prioritizing my own mental health, to make sure that as I'm prioritizing my own mental health, that I can still show up for my community in the best way possible.
With everything going on in the world and keeping up with current events, it can really weigh on you. I have definitely experienced negative mental health effects from keeping up with politics. It's very real. And I think it's really just important to take breaks. If you're taking in the news and reading all these articles every day, give yourself some grace, take some breaths. Don't try to learn everything all at once. And I think another really important thing is to not read biased articles, to try to keep yourself informed as possible on the facts, instead of getting caught up in all of the drama and all of the, one-sided narratives. And the most important thing I will always preach is self-care. Always, whether it's involved in politics, in daily life, always make sure you're taking time to care for yourself.
Absolutely, absolutely. I think it's definitely going into a couple of things. So one, making sure that consuming media or consuming like the news can come in different ways, especially depending on like what can trigger you or what can feel very overwhelming. So if it's visual, then I'll have days where I could be like, okay, this is what's happening visually, but sometimes that might be overwhelming. So I'll switch it up into maybe some podcasts or into reading the news. I think that's very important to understand, like my own, creating that that system for myself of my own boundaries, and then also pouring into self-care as well. And I think that's a big priority, especially for creators like yourself and I, where it's if we can't, we have to pour into our cup so we can pour into our communities, which we don't ever talk about, that self-care is also community care, and vice versa. So I'll set myself like limits where I'll be like, okay, I'll spend this much time on social media for this purpose, and then I'll create some art. I'll like go paint. I'll go do some hobbies. So I'll go run, exercise, and meditate. Especially, I love meditation. I think it's like very important to center yourself in the moment that you're in, and the moment of like what you're, grounding yourself, and then going like, okay, what's next? Like, what do I want to do with this? And yeah, just creating those boundaries, not only with yourself, but also your community, and like investing in things that can be outlets for those.
I love that. I love the whole concept too of that self-care is community care. That is so beautifully articulated. Thank you so much for that. And one thing that you shared that I really appreciated too was just kind of paying respect to the fact that how different types of content, whether that's reading or listening to it or visually seeing it, can affect you in different ways. That's something I hadn't personally thought of, but makes so much sense. So thank you so much for sharing that and how you personally care for yourself. I'm a huge advocate for self-care, and some of your thoughts around that are so helpful. So one thing I'm really curious about, because I've heard this a lot, especially among younger generations. As a Gen Zer myself, I've heard a lot of people say something along the lines of, you know what, forget this. I am staying out of politics. I don't want to talk about any of this. I'm not going to vote. I don't want to see any content about social justice issues. There's even those filters on Instagram and other apps where you can X out of seeing content among different topics. This is just all too draining to think about. What advice would you give for someone like that, who might genuinely deeply care about human rights issues, but finds it just too overwhelming to even think about?
I can very much understand that. I think staying out of politics, that concept, I think that's a privilege. If you're able to stay out of politics, I think you're in a very privileged position. But at the same time, politics impacts everyone in some shape or form, whether it's gender, race, mental health, sexuality, the economy, the state of the world. It's going to impact you. And I hear a lot of people saying that they don't like the person that's in office or how things are being run in the country. And the only way that that can change is if you get involved and you use your voice. And I do understand that it can be overwhelming and scary. And I'll say one thing that was really helpful for me in order to regain that balance and when things start to get a little overwhelming with politics is I take myself off of social media because I think it has desensitized us to violence and very graphic things going on in the world that maybe aren't necessary for us to be seeing. So I think it's important to, take a step back, really evaluate what you care about. Don't just vote about something because someone else tells you to do it. Do your own research and make sure, you know who you're voting for and what you're voting for.
That is a amazing question. And I think that just goes into decolonizing mental health, if that makes sense, which I want to share a couple of things, and then I'll go into the suggestions that I have, which this is going to be Decolonizing Mental Health from Palestine Mental Health Network. And there's like a myth and then there's a fact. And so I'll share that with you, and there'll be like 2 or 3 of these. And one is like mental health, the myth, number one, is mental health has nothing to do with politics, right? But the myth, the fact, the myth that mental health has nothing to do with politics perpetuates the silence of the face of the global injustices in Gaza, Congo, Sudan, decolonizing mental health advocacy by speaking out against systemic oppression. And so myth number 2 is the silence on Gaza helps mental health. And that's kind of this conversation that we're having where it's like, that's none of our business, that's something that I should care about. But understanding that the silence on mental health on Gaza or Congo or Sudan perpetuates trauma. So it's us decolonizing the way that we think about mental health and understanding that in a decolonial perspective of mental health, and also in more rooted in like indigeneity, is that interconnectedness, understanding that like we're all interconnected, and what's happening here on Turtle Island is going to affect what's happening in Congo and Sudan, etc. And that goes into that conversation of like, again, it goes into self-care, it goes into like understanding the limitations and like and yeah, for me, I've had to learn that like for me to care about myself is to care about my community and to start to work within that empathy. And what does that look like to kind of take that step into like caring more about like the global world? I think within like the Western realm, we tend to individualism is like very prioritized, and it's seen as like me. But when you think about like the global like indigenous like ideas, is that it's not only me and you, but it's the land, it's the community, it's our elders, it's the children. So yeah, I think it's definitely taking that step into that decolonizing mental health idea.
Thank you so much to Noa and Alejandra for your time and your expertise. They are doing such amazing work, so please check out the work that they're doing and support them. Here's how to find them. So using the wisdom provided by the experts, how can we stay mentally healthy during a turbulent political climate?
The first thing we learned is to stay informed, but don't ruminate. Research just enough information about a topic as you need to have the facts without going down a rabbit hole. Anytime an event happens, choose one source of information to learn from. Read or watch it, and then keep it moving. Often whenever something happens, we have a tendency to read dozens of news articles, talk to several friends and family members, and keep searching for more and more information, when, more often than not, the information is the same. We aren't learning anything new or coming to any genius breakthroughs. We are just ruminating and increasing our anxiety. Number 2 is to set boundaries and prioritize self-care. Setting boundaries can look many different ways, such as setting boundaries with yourself by setting limits on the amount of political content you consume, or setting boundaries with loved ones by having a rule that you will not discuss certain topics with them. If you're passionate about educating others, I think that is great, but know that you don't have to wear the role of educator in every relationship and interaction you have in your life. And remember that boundaries allow you to keep your relationships mutually healthy and beneficial while preserving your own wellness. Self-care can also vary from person to person. Self-care can look like channeling your passion into a creative outlet by drawing, painting, writing, singing, or dancing. Self-care can look like talking to others about interests outside of politics. During turbulent political climates, we can become very suspicious and negative towards others and the world around us. Engaging in enjoyable conversations and activities outside of politics can help remind us that we are more alike than different and that people are mostly good. Self-care can also look like engaging in physical activity, whether that's engaging in a sport we enjoy, going outside for a walk, walking barefoot in the sunlight, engaging in the world around us, doing yoga, stretching, whatever it looks like for you. When we are overwhelmed by something, we tend to spend a lot of time in our head. Engaging in some sort of physical activity can help us find an outlet for our stress and reconnect back into our bodies. And number 3 is to keep a consistent routine and go back to the basics. While this isn't something that came up in conversation with the experts, from my lived experience and working within the mental health field, it felt important to mention. When we are struggling mentally, no matter the cause, it can be difficult to set boundaries and practice self-care. During these times, when so much in our life feels outside of our control, it can be helpful to keep a consistent routine as much as possible and to try to honor our basic human needs. This can look like asking yourself these questions. When is the last time I had a drink of water? Am I thirsty right now? When is the last time I had a full meal? Should I eat something right now? Did I get enough sleep last night? Could I benefit from a nap or maybe go to bed earlier tonight? And when is the last time I connected someone from my social circle who I felt supported by? Should I reach out to someone today? These are just a few ways that we can honor ourselves to help us make it through the difficult times.
I wanted to add some food for thought surrounding a topic that Alejandra brought up. Alejandra brought up this idea that mental health is inherently political. And I feel like my shirt is perfect. You can't see it right now, but I'll put a picture because I just need to share. But I originally started creating this video from a place of neutrality. While I have my own political beliefs, I didn't want to insert them in this video because mental health challenges and stress surrounding the political climate is something that affects everyone, no matter what your political affiliation is. However, Alejandra is right. Mental health is inherently political. The people we elect, policies, laws, all of these things affect both our mental and physical well-being. It makes me think about SAMHSA's 8 dimensions of wellness wheel, which are the 8 primary factors that contribute to our overall well-being, including emotional, environmental, financial, intellectual, occupational, physical, social, and spiritual wellness. Laws, policies, and who we elect impact every single one of these dimensions. So if you're going to vote in national or local elections, vote like your mental health depends on it, because it does. If you are not voting, I encourage you to channel your passion into a cause that you care about. And remember that both your action and inaction have a cost. And if you've watched to the very end, thank you so much for sticking around. And if you enjoyed today's video, please give it a thumbs up and consider subscribing if you would like to see more hot topics in mental health. This is my very first video of my relaunch of my YouTube channel, so I put a lot of love into it. I hope that you enjoyed. Thank you again to Noa and Alejandra for your time and for this video. It means a lot to me. And comment below how you self-care and prioritize your mental health during this kind of hectic time politically. And I hope to see you back here soon. Thank you so much. Mwah!